In a lab, a scientist carefully injects an egg yolk with a strange green fluid. Almost instantly, an identical copy of the original yolk appears. At the same time, across the country on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, the legendary actress Elizabeth has finally awarded her star. In the first year, fans gather eagerly to admire it, showing their love and admiration. But as time goes on, fewer and fewer people stop to notice. The once glorious star starts to crack, but no one bothers to fix it. Now that Elizabeth is middle-aged, her career has slowed down, and getting new job offers isn't as easy as it used to be. She finds herself hosting a robot show, far from the roles she used to land. One day when she's at work, she discovers that the women's bathroom is out of order, so she decides to use the men's room. While she's in a stall, she overhears the president of the network, Harvey, come in mid-conversation on his phone. Unaware that Elizabeth is there, he goes on complaining about how she's too old for the show and that they need someone younger and fresher. Harvey leaves without ever realizing she heard every word. Later at lunch, Harvey officially fires Elizabeth, though he dances around the truth, too cowardly to be straightforward about it. On her drive home, her mind is still racing from the day's events. She barely notices as workers take down her whole billboard. Distracted, she doesn't see an oncoming car, and there's a terrible crash. At the hospital, a doctor assures Elizabeth that miraculously, she's completely unharmed. As he looks over her file, he spots her birth date and casually wishes her a happy birthday. That's when everything hits her, and she finally breaks down. Once the doctor leaves, a nurse comes in, saying there's one more exam to be done. He checks her spine, and then, rather cryptically, says she's the perfect candidate. He hands her back her jacket, and she's free to go. As Elizabeth steps outside, she notices something odd. A small package stuffed into her jacket pocket. Inside, she finds a flash drive labeled The Substance, along with a phone number. Right at that moment, Fred, an old classmate, happens to run into her. He tells her she's as stunning as ever, and slips her his number before parting ways. Curious, Elizabeth heads home and plugs in the flash drive. A promotional video plays, advertising The Substance, a mysterious product that promises its users the ability to live as a younger, better version of themselves, switching between their youthful and older bodies every 7 days. Skeptical and convinced it's just another scam, Elizabeth tosses the flash drive in the trash, uncertain of what to believe. That night, Elizabeth goes to a bar and drinks alone, getting drunk in the process. But it doesn't take long for her to head back home and throw up, because at her age, drinking isn't as easy as it used to be. Frustrated and angry, she grabs a snow globe and hurls it at a framed poster of her younger self. After this outburst, she retrieves the flash drive and decides to call the number on it. The mysterious voice on the other end asks for her address and gives her another one in return before abruptly hanging up. The next morning, Elizabeth is even more upset when she sees a casting call ad in the newspaper, looking for the next Elizabeth for their show. Feeling insulted, she tosses the newspaper away. She then checks her mail and finds a black envelope. Inside, there's only a card with the number 503 printed on it. Later, she goes to the address the mysterious voice gave her, which turns out to be in a shady, rundown alley. She uses the card to open the door, which only lifts halfway, and leads her into a dark, eerie corridor. She walks down the corridor until she reaches a room filled with deposit boxes. She locates the one with her number on it, 503, and opens it to find a cardboard box. Elizabeth takes it home and finally opens it. Inside is a kit for something called The Substance. The kit contains an activator, a stabilizer, a switch, and special food. The instructions tell her that she must activate it once, stabilize her condition daily, change bodies every 7 days without fail, and remember she is still one person. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, Elizabeth examines her reflection, then injects herself with the green liquid from the kit. For a few moments, nothing seems to happen, but then a wave of intense pain hits her, and she collapses to the floor, writhing in agony. Her pupils start to split, and strange, moving bulges appear along her back. Suddenly, a huge slit forms down her body, and, to her shock, an entirely new human being emerges from within her. Elizabeth looks into the mirror and realizes she's now in a much younger body. As she takes a closer look, feeling sick, she throws up some of the strange green liquid. Then, the new body, now fully in control, closes the slit in the old one and injects it with the special food packs from the kit. The next morning, the new Elizabeth, now living in this younger body, hears a sharp screeching noise and notices her nose is bleeding. This reminds her she needs to stabilize herself every day. Using the kit from the box, she takes spine fluid from her old body and injects it into the new one. Feeling better, she goes out, buys herself some nice clothes, and heads to an audition. Introducing herself as Sue, she impresses Harvey, the network president, who quickly hires her. But Sue has a condition. She can only work every other week, as she claims she needs to care for her sick mother. Desperate to have someone as beautiful as her on the show, Harvey agrees without hesitation. That week, Sue enjoys being the center of attention again. A new billboard with her face goes up, and she relishes the limelight. Every day she remembers to stabilize her body, though she never bothers to move Elizabeth's body from the bathroom floor. At the end of the week, Sue uses the kit to connect both bodies again, and a blood exchange happens between them. Sue soon passes out, and when Elizabeth wakes up, she immediately feels the pain from the scar on her back. Returning to work, Harvey barely acknowledges her and hands over a box of her things, giving her a quick, cold goodbye. Elizabeth's weak back and her own body feels dull and unexciting. She can't wait to be Sue again. Every day she makes sure to stabilize herself, and soon enough, another black envelope arrives, signaling that a new refill kit is ready for pickup. This means she'll have to go back to the shady alley for another visit. When Sue returns the following week, she finds a hollow spot in the bathroom wall and begins tearing it down, intending to create a secret hideout for her other body. She spends hours working on it, and the noise eventually brings a neighbor to her door complaining. But the moment he sees Sue, he quickly calms down. She casually tells him that Elizabeth has moved out and shuts the door in his face when he tries flirting with her. With the hidden room finally ready, Sue stashes Elizabeth's body and the large poster of her old self inside. Now Sue is free to fully live her new life. She hosts her TV show, and everyone adores her, especially for her stunning looks, which she's more than happy to show off. At night, she goes out partying with other young people, and even brings a guy home to have some fun. But in the middle of their time together, the screeching noise returns, and her nose starts to bleed. Sue rushes to the bathroom, panicked, and opens the secret room where she keeps Elizabeth's body. She finds the body writhing as it finishes the last food bag. Desperate to get back to the guy she's with, Sue decides to break the rules. Instead of switching bodies, she reuses one of the stabilizer tubes and extracts more fluid from Elizabeth's body to inject into herself. As soon as she feels better, she hurries back to her guests, and they spend the night together. But in the middle of their fun, when the zipper on Sue's clothes is undone, a horrifying sight unfolds. Organs and blood spill out of her body. Thankfully, it's just a nightmare. The next morning, Elizabeth wakes up in her old body, only to find the mess Sue left behind in the apartment. There's also a note from the man, saying he'll come back later for his bike. As Elizabeth processes everything, she's horrified to see that the extra hours Sue spent in the young body have taken a toll. Part of her hand now looks wrinkled and old. She rushes to the sink, trying desperately to wash it off, but nothing works. Panicking, Elizabeth calls the number from the flash drive.
I'm 503. Been a slight misuse, causing an alteration. So I'm just looking for the procedure to reverse it.
There's no going back.
She was drunk.
You are one. Respect the balance.
Afterward, Elizabeth cleans up the apartment while the TV plays in the background, showing Sue on her show. Watching the beauty of her younger self on screen makes Elizabeth seethe with jealousy, and she angrily switches the TV off. A knock on the door interrupts her, and it's the neighbor again, trying to ask her out, but Elizabeth never opens the door. Later that day, Elizabeth heads back to the shady alley to pick up her refill box. As she's about to leave, she hears a strange sound, almost like someone whispering the word Sue. Frightened, she grabs the box and runs away as fast as she can. She finds herself in a diner, trying to keep her disfigured hand hidden under a glove. Suddenly, an old man sitting nearby speaks up, remarking that 7 days can feel like a lifetime. Elizabeth glances at him and notices something strange. He has the same birthmark on his arm as the nurse who gave her the flash drive. He gives her a knowing wink, and as he fumbles with his wallet, a card with the number 207 falls out. The nurse had been this old man's younger body, created by the substance. The man begins sharing his experience with her, that it deserves to exist. When he asks her if the young body has started eating away at her yet, Elizabeth is overwhelmed with fear. She bolts out of the diner, terrified by what her future might hold. Outside her apartment, Elizabeth bumps into the guy from the night before, the one who came back to pick up his bike. He angrily yells at her before storming off. Needing something to lift her spirits, Elizabeth decides to call Fred and agrees to go on a date. She picks out her best outfit, but when it comes time for makeup, she ends up mimicking Sue's younger, vibrant style. On her way out, she glances at the huge billboard with Sue's picture, and it stirs up her insecurities about her body again. Trying to shake off the negative feelings, Elizabeth grabs some accessories and changes her makeup to better suit her age. But just as she's about to head out again, the sight of that billboard keeps gnawing at her. Once more, she retreats to the bathroom, her emotions unraveling as she messes with her makeup, in hair and frustration. In the end, she can't bring herself to go on the date and ignores all the texts Fred sends her. The next week, while Sue is filming her show, she suddenly panics when she feels a bulge forming on her rear. Alarmed, she quickly checks, but there's nothing there. The crew replays the footage on the big screen to see what happened, and Sue feels completely exposed, humiliated even. Grabbing a robe, she rushes to her dressing room. In the mirror, she notices the bulge again, and this time, she frantically pushes it through her body until it moves to her stomach. Desperate, she reaches inside through her belly button and pulls out a chicken leg. When Sue wakes up after the next body exchange, she finds food leftovers all around, clearly left by Elizabeth, who has been overeating to cope with her depression. Furious, Sue calls the number from the flash drive to complain. She vents about how she barely has any time to enjoy her new life because of all the work. When Sue goes back to work, she's shocked to learn that the taping for her show has been canceled. Nervous, she's called into Harvey's office, but he surprises her with great news. She's become so popular that they want her to host a special New Year's Eve event. Thrilled, Sue eagerly accepts and heads home, but she knows she can't miss this big opportunity. To make sure she's at her best, Sue sneaks more fluid from Elizabeth's spine, draining even more than usual. Her career takes off, and Sue keeps extracting fluid from Elizabeth's body for several days. The hole on Elizabeth's back turns green and starts looking infected. When Elizabeth finally returns to her body, she's horrified by what she sees. Her body is now old, decrepit, and her legs are so weak she can barely stand.
She didn't respect the balance.
Would you like to stop? You can put an end to the experience, to go back to being just you, on your own.
The balance just needs to be respected. Stop it, stop it, stop it.
On the last night, Elizabeth struggles to get up from her chair, but her leg just won't cooperate. She ends up having to move it by hand, which brings her a lot of pain.
Sue! On our screens like a tornado. You are going to host the New Year's Eve show? Can you confirm that?
Yes, that's right.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Very small town in Indiana. Not even a town.
That you replaced Elizabeth Sparkle.
That we're not exactly from the same generation. Jurassic Fitness, really.
Jurassic Fitness.
Sue takes jabs at the old show, and Elizabeth begins hurling food at the screen. It feels like even the billboard is mocking her, so in frustration she throws eggs at the window, covering it with newspaper. Before making any changes, Elizabeth yells at her reflection in the mirror, trying to remind Sue to keep her emotions in check. When Sue wakes up, she's shocked to find the apartment in a disgusting mess and starts hurling insults at Elizabeth, craving revenge. She takes several doses of spinal fluid to avoid changing bodies again. Fast forward 3 months, and Sue is still firmly in control. Ads for her New Year's Eve show are plastered all over TV and the billboard. One night, Sue brings a man back to the apartment, but tells him to wait while she goes to the bathroom. The hidden room is a dump, yet Sue keeps draining fluid from Elizabeth without bothering to clean. The injection site is now infected with the liquid oozing out dark and almost necrotic. Feeling dizzy, Sue dials a number explaining that she's run out of stabilizer fluid. The voice on the other end informs her that she has drained it all away. The fluid needs time to regenerate, and for that to happen, Sue must switch bodies, panicking. Sue refuses her big show looming the next day, but then her nose begins to bleed, and she collapses in a desperate state, struggling with the pain. Sue has no choice but to crawl back to the bathroom and finally make the change in the bedroom. The man hears a noise and approaches the bathroom, but Elizabeth manages to lock the door before he can catch a glimpse of her, ignoring his questions. She looks into the mirror and is horrified by the sight of an abomination. Staring back, furious, she yells at him to leave. Afterward, when she emerges from the bathroom, walking in this new body proves so difficult that she keeps stumbling. Finally, once she reaches the living room, she calls the number and decides to cancel the experience. Then she brings her old poster out of the secret room. The next morning, a black envelope arrives, telling her that the last delivery is in the box. Elizabeth quickly covers her body with as many clothes as she can find. On her way out, she yells at the neighbor, who instantly hides in fear. She dashes to the alley to grab the box and brings it home, eager to open it inside. She finds a single syringe filled with a black liquid. Suddenly, a voice warns her that there's no going back, but she ignores it and injects the dark fluid into Sue's body. Just then, she remembers that tonight is the big show and stops herself before emptying the syringe. Next, Elizabeth gives Sue CPR, causing blood to trickle from her nose. Seeing this as a sign, Elizabeth retrieves the change kit and gives Sue some of her blood, which revives her. The two women stare at each other in shock until Sue spots a termination syringe on the ground. Panic takes over, and she chases after Elizabeth, kicking her against her big poster before pushing her into some broken glass in an attempt to choke her. Elizabeth grabs a vase and smashes it over Sue's head, then races toward the bathroom. Sue tries to follow, but when Elizabeth locks the door, Sue kicks it repeatedly, trying to break in. She manages to kick Elizabeth again, forcing her to look at their reflection in the mirror. Then Sue begins smashing her head against it. After several hard hits, Sue finally drops the body and Elizabeth crawls away, only for Sue to send her flying with another kick. The kicking continues for several minutes, until at last, Elizabeth is dead. Covered in blood, Sue realizes the horror of what she has done and breaks down in tears. But her thoughts quickly turn to her upcoming show. That night, Sue arrives at the TV station. As she sits in the makeup chair, she starts coughing and hears a screeching noise. She rushes to the bathroom to spit in the sink, and to her shock, a tooth falls from her mouth. Wanting to test her condition, Sue pulls out 2 more teeth, which come out easily, leaving her spitting blood. After cleaning herself up, she meets with Harvey and the shareholders, offering a closed-mouth smile. Then she steps into the elevator and presses the button, only to discover her nails are coming off as well. At that moment, one of her ears plops right onto her lap. She tries to stay calm, especially since a man enters the elevator too. Sue quickly covers the hole in her head with her hand until the man leaves. Afterwards, Sue leaves through the back door and races back to her apartment, searching for the activator that was supposed to be used only once. Hoping to create a new, beautiful body, she injects herself with the green liquid and collapses to the floor in pain as her back splits open. When the process is complete, Sue checks her new body in the mirror and is horrified to see a grotesque, deformed creature with Elizabeth's face on her back. This creature is Monster Elisa Sue. After throwing up the green liquid, she puts on the show dress and jewelry, curling the few hair strands she has. Seeing that doesn't help much, she decides to destroy the old poster to make a mask, which she glues to her face and adds lipstick to. Then she heads to the TV station and is thrilled to find everyone welcoming her with praises, but soon realizes it's just her imagination. The main stage lights are off, so Elisa Sue manages to sneak on without being seen. When the show begins and the lights turn on, Elisa Sue tries to speak into the mic, but only mumbling comes out of her deformed mouth. Suddenly, the mask falls off, and she starts to vomit body parts, which disgusts everyone. After the initial shock, a woman screams, and a man shouts at her, calling her a monster. This sends the rest of the audience into a panic. A group of guys surrounds her, pushing her around and hurling insults like monster and freak. Elisa Sue crumbles to the floor in tears, trying to speak, but unable to make any sound. When she finally stands up, a man hits her with a baseball bat, decapitating her. However, as her head slowly regenerates, her arm falls off, causing blood to spray everywhere. Showering the crowd for several minutes, the entire room becomes drenched in red, and the people can barely move as they slip and fall against each other. Eventually, Elisa Sue manages to escape the building, but as she runs down the street, she falls, and her body explodes into thousands of gory pieces. The only part that remains alive is Elisa Sue's face, which crawls out of the mess to reach her star. She happily stands on it, reminiscing about the old days until she melts away. The next morning, a floor scrubber cleans up the blood, as if it were just another stain on the street.